Even a few months ago, who would have thought that we would be talking in India about vaccines going waste? I'm Barkha Dutt, and this is the Mojo Story. On the program today, we take a deep dive into the debate around booster shots or the third jab to protect us against COVID. In India, the government has chosen to provide what it calls a precautionary dose only to health workers and those above 60. In the meantime, millions of doses are expected to go waste in the next 4 months. In fact, 50 lakhs have already set to expire this very week. Our sources are confirming to us that 150 million doses of Covishield will basically go waste in the next 4 months if they are not requisitioned. The question is, given the availability, the easy availability of vaccines, given that most of the world is offering a third shot as a complete COVID vaccination program, why is India still hesitating to administer this third shot? And what do we make of this, frankly, criminal wastage of vaccines? Let's introduce our experts on the program today. Very pleased to see Professor Shahid Jameel after a long gap. He's presently at the University of Oxford, one of India's best known virologists and experts. Joining us also from the United Kingdom today, from the University Hospital at Birmingham, is Dr. Wasim Hanif. Also joining us, Dr. Ishwar Gilada, great friend, infectious disease expert. Great to have you back. Dr. Vineeta Bal, another one of our regular experts and one of our best-known scientists. Great to see you again, ma'am. And joining us from the United States, somebody who's been, I think, one of the most passionate voices globally on the issue of vaccine equity from the McGill University, Dr. Madhu. So great to see you all. Let me start with you, Madhu, because I know that vaccine equity has been a singular focus for you. This is a very strange situation. We have a situation where we don't have the kind of crazy kooky anti-vaxxer movement that the West is plagued by. Canada, where you are, has seen that more than any other country in the recent past. And yet we have, and I know this reliably from people involved really in this directly, that we are looking at 50 lakh doses expiring this week and 150 million are just going to go to waste if not requisitioned. This is Covishield in the next 4 months. What do you make of this irony, Dr. Pai?
I think, firstly, Indians, we are all extremely privileged to have had local manufacturing. I think we've seen how much the world has suffered when you do not have the capacity to manufacture. Take a look at the African continent. They're still waiting to manufacture their own vaccines, and barely 15% of the continent is double vaxxed. So, in some ways, it's a miracle that India has had this capacity, and I think we're all very lucky, including my mom in India, who is 80 plus, and I think she survived because she got 2 doses and the booster shot. So if India truly has this many doses that are going to expire, as you said, Barkha, it's a criminal to let it go waste. It must go into people's arms. Wasting life-saving vaccines is absolute negligence. So at a minimum, everybody in India who wants the third dose should be offered it, especially people who have any kind of immunocompromising conditions. We know India, for example, has a massive prevalence of diabetes. So people with diabetes, people with heart disease, people who have other immunocompromising conditions must be offered the booster dose. That's what most countries in the world have done. They may have started off with the older age groups
Yeah.
to conserve vaccines, but then sooner or later, everybody over 18 have been offered boosters, and that's how most countries in the world have done.
Can I interject there? You are basically saying that, especially given the availability of millions of doses in stockpile and storage, there is no good reason, no scientific reason for India not to open up the third shot for everyone above 18. Is that
None
correct,
at
Dr.
all. In
Pai?
fact, it should be offered to all people, adults, and especially adults with any immunocompromising condition. We cannot let it go waste. If there is some earth-shatteringly other reason that we do not know, then at a minimum, why can we not offer those vaccines to our neighboring countries with much lower vaccine coverage than ours? The point is, if we allow 3 billion people in the world right now who are completely unvaccinated, there will be new variants, and virologists like Dr. Jameel will confirm that that is the case. You cannot have tremendous viral replication around the world, that many people unprotected and not pay the consequences, there will be a new variant, and we cannot be caught sleeping the way we did after Delta, assuming that we are okay. In fact, it's a very pernicious thing happening globally right now, especially in the rich parts of the world where everybody is in a rush to declare the pandemic over. And when I hear that, and my blood starts boiling, I said, "What the heck are you talking about? Over for whom? Over for the lucky triple vaccinated people, or over for the 3 billion people who have had zero doses?" We cannot think like that. So we've got to think globally. And India can certainly donate to COVAX.
But we're not at the point of donation, because if we believe in the triple vaccination, then we are a far way from that triple vaccination, Madhu, because we are not even offering the third shot right now
Absolutely.
to adults. And I'm hearing you say that all adults should be offered the third shot.
No question about that. After Omicron, there's no scientific debate. If availability is not an issue, 100%.
Okay, so 100% all adults must get the third shot. Shahid, Jameel, what do you think?
Well, I agree entirely with Dr. Pai that every adult should be offered a vaccine. But I must add here that it's the language that is confusing people. World over, everyone is getting a booster shot. In India, you're getting precaution doses. Uh, if I were to get a vaccine, I would say, well, I already have precaution doses as the first dose and the second dose. So why should I need another dose as a precaution? So I think the terminology, the language you use is very important, and we should be using the right language. Throughout this pandemic, Indians have acted as if they are exclusive. We are not. We are just as susceptible as anybody else. Uh, so, I've been saying this and I've been writing about it, that even the choice of the third dose is not the right choice. Nevertheless, that's another debate. But whatever you have is going to give added protection to people. And as Dr. Pai mentioned, India has a very large population with diabetes, with cardiovascular disease, all of that. And you know the language has to be simple, the policy has to be simple. You can't have people over 60 who have comorbidities, need to consult their doctor. So many conditions don't really work. Make it simple, don't complicate it further, and people will come forward to take the vaccine.
But why do you think there is an hesitation? And I hear what you say, Professor Jameel. You're saying the moment you call it a precautionary dose, people may think it's not necessary or not required.
Yes, but the evidence world over shows that if you get a third dose of whatever vaccine, and I will not go into the debate whether this vaccine works better than that vaccine, although there is
Sure.
evidence for that. And India has those vaccines available. Nevertheless, for whatever reason, India has decided to go not with heterologous booster, but with a homologous booster.
Can you can
Uh,
you explain
at
can you
least
explain that can you explain that simply for
Sorry,
people who, yes.
a homologous booster would be the same vaccine that you got in dose one or two. Heterologous boost would be a different vaccine that you got in dose one and two. Uh, so whatever is available, give it. It will give better protection to people, and there are enough people in India with comorbidities who will benefit from these vaccines. There is data now coming from US that if a vaccine would not have been available during the pandemic, US would have seen 1 million additional deaths.
Wow.
That is the power of this vaccination. And as Dr. Pai said, we are very, very lucky in India, and we should thank the vaccine manufacturers that they got on with it and got on with it so quickly, so that we are privileged to have these vaccines.
Yeah.
Vaccines will not protect if they remain in a vial. Vaccines will only protect when they get into our arm. And this is something that we need to understand.
What do you think, and I want to take this to Dr. Vineeta Bal now, what do you think then is the hesitation of the ICMR? The Indian Council for Medical Research has repeatedly ruled out the need for boosters thus far. It has, as Shahid said, called them precautionary doses, and they're confined to the older population and health workers, frontline workers. Now, the question would be, if healthline workers need it and older people need it, why don't the rest of us need it, Vineeta?
Yeah. Well, first silly thing, I suspect, but the certificate that one gets after the third dose actually calls it precaution dose, not even precautionary dose. So it's even worse. So what is precaution dose? But I have no idea why ICMR is saying no to this. My one hunch, and maybe that is simply a hunch now, is that there isn't, as we have seen in 22-23 budget, the provision for procuring vaccines has been phenomenally slashed up. So, does that mean that even if these X many million doses are available with Serum Institute, they cannot be bought by Government of India, and that is why the government is going very slowly and not cautiously, but slowly and steadily to over 60 and health workers and so on and so forth. That's a possibility that cannot be denied, and I worry about it, and whether ICMR head honchos knew about the policy or whether they had some other reason. I don't see any scientific reason, as Dr. Pai and Shahid both have said, that if at all there is going to be an advantage with a booster dose.
So
It
you're
is not.
actually saying that maybe the reason lies not in science but in finance.
I suspect because there is such major, I think, as compared to last year, there is only 20% provision in terms of budget. I'm forgetting 350 crores to 60 crores or something like that. I'm not good about remembering those numbers, but I distinctly remember feeling shocked that if there is still the below 18 population, which is about 30% in our country, which needs vaccination as and when available, and for that we are not making any provision. So your argument about doses going waste is sort of fitting into that, and Serum Institute is a for profit private commercial institute, so obviously they would need money. They might sell the vaccine at a lower dose, but they are not going to give it free. How will they give it free? In which case, who is responsible? I mean, it's an utter colossal waste. I also
Yeah.
feel there is one more point that should be added, that I understand that Covaxin, which is in relatively short supply in terms of production, is being given to 15 to 18-year age group. And then it will come to 12 to 15 as well. There were some hiccups about Covishield, meaning AstraZeneca vaccine, when it was tried in clinical trial on children. There were some hiccups. So far, it hasn't been approved. Serum Institute or ICMR or whoever, Government of India, could have sponsored projects so that there could have been testing of Covishield in India for 15 to 18 or 12 to 15, 12 to 18 age group, the way Covaxin has been done, in which case there would have been shortage of vaccine doses rather than vaccine going waste, which wasn't done. Last January, 1 year ago, we started giving this vaccine to everybody, not everybody, but it was available for 18 plus age. And by now, we would have had a lot of data if it was possible, if somebody had taken efforts to do it. I think it's a criminal offense, even as as academics, as administrators, health administrators, we should have seen this ahead and then should have done it.
And you're saying it's a criminal offense to let these vaccines go waste.
Sure.
If that's what happens, and I agree. And and
Yes.
and and there have been other proposals that have come from the private sector. I don't know what you all feel about it as public health specialists. Dr. Gilada, Kiran Shaw, for example, has argued that if the government is not going to procure vaccines, let the private sector have the authority to administer third shots to everybody, meaning any adult, all adults. Is that a model then, if funds is the issue? We don't know if funds is the issue, but if it is.
See, whatever model we think, Barkha, they don't work. If you look back your own programs, we talked about vaccine Maitri. They talked about international vaccine Maitri. I said domestic vaccine Maitri. If vaccines are expiring at a private setup, you exchange that with the government setup. Government setup is using faster, you exchange that with a longer expiry. That didn't happen. We said that you start vaccination at blood banks, at ANC clinics, at nursing homes. It doesn't happen. So I think even if simple logical solutions are given, what we have seen in our country, science and logic, they do not work. I do not know what works. And there are so many committees. For example, even if vaccine is approved by CDSCO, it cannot be given till Nitagi committee approves that. INSACOG, ICMR, everybody has their own committees, and their committees are sitting on those kind of solutions. And every time they say, probably from March we'll start in this age group. Why should we wait for that? If we have given approval to Zyco D 6 months before, 7 months before, where is the vaccine? If we have prepared for Corbevax, almost 6 months before, 1500 crore were given for 30 crore vaccine. Where are the vaccines? Now, yesterday they got a clearance from subject expert committee. Thereafter, it will go to CDSCO. Thereafter, if you see, there are 9 vaccines available on menu card, but reality only 2 vaccines are available. That means you keep on giving license. You cannot sell the vaccine to private setup. It has to be only through government channel, and government channel will buy only 2 vaccines. And they say that we have 9 vaccine on our platter.
So you're
What is the
saying
use
there's
of
too
the
much.
same?
You're saying there's too much bureaucracy in getting these vaccines rolled out. But even more than that, there is a reluctance. There is no move to administer the Indian adult population with a third shot, Dr. Gilada. There's no movement on that at all.
Barkha, they started with the third shot, whatever you call it, is a third shot or booster. They made a gap of 9 months between 2 doses for 60 plus people. There are 6 crore people out of 12 crore in 60 plus. They have not taken, they have taken second dose in last 6 months. That means booster is not available for them. So, what is the logic? Why should you keep a gap of 9 months?
Yeah,
So, talk science. Science all over the world is 5 to 6 months. And after 6 months, people can be getting it. Similarly, a lot of healthcare workers or frontline workers, they had not taken vaccine initially. They were hesitant, and thereafter they took the second dose between last 6 months, because you made a gap of 3 to 4 months between two COVID
right,
doses. So
right.
you don't. If you look at the current vaccine stock at government setups, 22 crore vaccines were there. At present, there are 12 crore vaccines available. So at least you reduce the gap between 2 doses of Covishield. You reduce the gap between requirement of 6 months, 9 months to 6 months. You open the vaccination of third dose or booster dose for those people who are with comorbidity or 45 plus people, and give as many people as you can. But at least if you don't want to give, then as I told on your program, booster is like icing on the cake. People did not get the cake. You provide the cake to them, and you started when we had a few thousand or few million vaccine. That time you started a vaccine Maitri program. Now we have millions and millions of vaccine. Why you don't want to give the
Yeah,
vaccine to other people?
yeah,
So I think we should open up, and unless and until we care for those countries which are lower and middle income countries, we'll keep on seeing newer variant coming. Maybe
yeah.
variant of interest only, but some of them will be variant of concern also.
Yeah, and I think that's the point, that there's that belief, that COVID is over, that COVID is behind us, and we don't understand that, while none of us, I think, are advocates of restrictions and locking down, more cases could lead to more variants. Dr. Wasim, if I can get the United Kingdom experience here, of course, there has been a mixing up of vaccines, AstraZeneca, and then followed by the mRNA vaccine, either the Pfizer or Moderna. But everything is open. Everything is open, and there is no hesitation in getting that third shot. I'm not even sure if it should be called the booster shot. Wasi?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Barkha. I think there are a couple of things. I think we just need to take a step back and really go into the whole of the vaccination debate. Now, one of the main things that is really missing here is why did all these committees, be it in the UK, be it in India, came up with these prescriptions saying that you first give it to 60 years, 70 years, or whatever the thing was. And the main reason was that we didn't have enough vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
And we were looking at reducing the risk of what we call a population risk in terms of trying to figure out where we will get the most buck for the money, which is where we are going to save most lives. And that is where all these hierarchy of vaccination comes in. Now, once you had enough stock of the vaccine, be it in the UK or now, as you're telling, in India, I think this hierarchy should disappear. And fortunately, it did in the UK, because in the UK, for the booster doses, and I'll call them booster doses, or the third dose for people who are immunocompromised because their immunity is not boosted and they may require a fourth dose. In these group of patients, once that hierarchy went in, everybody was offered the vaccination. So if you have enough stock, and again, we can talk about it, whether there should be a kind of a nationalistic thing around vaccination, which I completely oppose. I
Mhm.
completely agree with Madhukar that unless vaccinate the world, you're not going to be safe. But if you have got additional stock, please give it away or give it to everyone. There is no scientific reason for going through this hierarchy and this bureaucracy. The other point we need to understand is that this is no longer a pandemic. It is getting into endemic phase, which means we may require boosters every year for God knows when. And therefore, it is very important that whoever wants it can go and get it. If people don't want to have boosters or anti vaxxers, these are less than 5%. We can't keep on focusing on them. Let us focus on the vast majority of the people, good people everywhere in the world who want to have a vaccine and protect themselves. This is now about reducing your personal risk. Even if you're an 18-year-old and want to reduce your personal risk, you should have the choice. And this hierarchy, or what I call medical neo-fascism that is creeping in, should end.
Very interesting phrase, medical neo-fascism. Is that how you see it, Professor Jameel? Is it a kind of neo-fascism? Medical neo-fascism. Basically, to deconstruct what Dr. Wasim has just said, the age hierarchy only made sense when there was a vaccine shortage because you had to focus on the group where you could save most lives. Now that vaccines are not in short supply, and I know Dr. Pai may think differently because, where are they not in short supply is the next question. But now that vaccines in our country, India, are not in short supply, does the age hierarchy need to end?
Yes, I think so. I think it should end. Medicine is all about risk versus benefit. Uh, yes, initially, when vaccines were in short supply, it made sense to protect the most vulnerable populations. But now, with so many extra doses available, and thankfully they are available, we should remove these. And I'll go back to what I said earlier, keep things simple. COVID is complicated enough. Let's not add more complexity to it. Uh, the solutions for any complex problem don't have to be complex too. Solutions have to be simple, and that's how it will work. So, yes, please open it to everyone for which the vaccine has been tested and approved. Don't have this hierarchy.
But I do keep coming back to what the thinking of the government is and is the answer in the math. But before I come to that, Madhu, you focus so much on the equity issue. Uh, how are we in a position where we're looking at a glut in some countries and a shortage in the other? Where is this shortage, and what should countries that have a surplus do? And how should they handle their anti-vaxxers? Actually, the failure of countries like Canada and the United States to be able to mandate or at least incentivize the vaccine is also a failure. It's a governance failure.
So, firstly, Barkha, pandemics by definition are global events, right? But the behavior of nation states during the last 2 years have been anything but global in terms of their thinking. There has never been a global coordinated plan to end this pandemic. Right from get go, every nation pretty much went rogue. The richest nations in the world cornered pretty
Mhm.
much all of the vaccine supply and pre ordered doses to cover their population several times. Canada, where I am, is probably one of the biggest vaccine holders in the world. And
And
it's a
we're seeing these
struggle here.
we're seeing these pictures of all of these anti-lockdown, anti-vaccine protests that have
Incredible.
and
It's
uh,
incredible.
Canada's had to invoke emergency measures, right?
Absolutely.
And
So
so,
so
like,
why
yeah, go ahead.
why in this nationalistic way of thinking,
Yeah.
every country has gone isolationist. Every country has done nothing but prioritize themselves. And even when there is a glut, as there is here, as there is in the United States, in EU, our government seem to be reluctant to donate the doses. Every rich nation is underachieving on its pledges to COVAX. On top of it, richest nations in the world are imposing this vaccine apartheid by denying the TRIPS waiver. Canada is opposing it. UK is opposing it. EU is opposing it. Why can we not give the recipe to all nations that want to manufacture? I want to see more nations be like India, have the ability to manufacture. Nothing is more life saving in a crisis than self reliance. We don't want vaccine charity anymore. We want vaccine justice. And
Okay,
vaccine
you
justice
you
means
you wrote,
hand the
Madhu, one of
recipe.
Madhu, in earlier this year you wrote a piece saying we're playing whack-a-mole with variants and the virus is winning. Do you still think that?
Oh, 100%. We are simply allowing 3.2 billion people with no access to vaccines at all. How is this viable and tenable? The most worrisome thing that I'm now dealing with is this widespread belief that COVID pandemic is over, right? Omicron is done it. Omicron is the vaccine that we were looking for. We can stop worrying about vaccination and vaccine equity. And I worry whether the Indian government might fall into the same trap. That look, Indians, 70% of plus adults are vaccinated, double vaccinated. Omicron has blown through the country. We have reached population herd immunity. Let's just call this closed. And I agree with Dr. Bal. This could be cutting corners and not doing what's necessary. And India has this century-old track record of underinvesting in health. Government after government barely
Yeah.
spends 1.5% of the GDP on health, and this is just another symptom of that reluctance to spend. You would think after losing millions of people, we would have woken up and invested in health, right? Not happening.
Yeah.
Our leaders are not seeing it. And this is happening everywhere in the world. I'm terrified that we're going to allow 3 billion people around the world with no options. What about the new antivirals? What about the rapid test? Don't people
Mm.
need access to that as well? There is no global coordinated plan. And countries like India, Canada, UK have domestically done so badly that they've struggled internally, that they've failed to show global leadership. So, who is running the ship of a global plan to end COVID pandemic everywhere? Nobody.
Yeah, Dr. Bal, I think the problem is that it's become even more difficult to create that kind of awareness because people, Indians, for example, see these street protests in America, see these street protests in Canada, and Professor Jameel made this point about language. One of the phrases that has really emboldened anti-vaxxers is this thing called breakthrough infections. The number of people I have struggled to explain to that just because you can get infected after getting a vaccine doesn't mean the vaccine isn't doing its job. The vaccine's job was to protect you from hospitalization and death. And as Shahid mentioned, there's data now coming from the US of that difference being 1 million more deaths without the vaccine. You believe, and I think you were the first to raise it in this program, that the issue could be the reluctance to spend money.
I still think it is an issue that we may not have enough money to spend. And as Dr. Pai was saying, our investment in public health is so meager. And all that was done during the pandemic, I know I'm going a little bit away from the vaccine, but was to create temporary hospitals. So those temporary hospitals were meant only when people were seriously ill, and now the temporary hospitals are getting shut because I think in today's newspaper I read that the central government has given out this indication that the pandemic conditions should be relaxed and so on and so forth. So that is something that one needs to worry about. But I also think that different parts of the country are unable to do anything about vaccination, and also the point that Dr. Gilada was making about the private sector. I think what is required is that the central government should withdraw the Epidemic Diseases Act, under which it is responsible for providing health to the country in the pandemic situation. Once that is withdrawn, then there will be a little more freedom for the states, for other people, because as you know, health is a state subject. So
And you did the math on the budget cut specifically on the vaccine, if you want to share that with us.
Yes, from what I read, there were 35,000 crores supposed to be spent on vaccine last year. In fact, 39,000 crores were spent. So this we are talking about 21-22 as the Indian budget. And for 22-23, the budget which was announced recently actually said 5,000 crore provision has been made. And as and when required, this may be
Uh,
upped further. But where is 5,000 and where is 39,000 crores that we are talking about? So this is something that is a serious issue, and that's also contributing to a lot of problems that are created. About the private sector, while I understand that there are middle classes which might still want to go to the private sector and take vaccines, last time we have seen the fiasco when second dose or when the private sector was allowed to buy the vaccines. And I worry about it that the majority of the people, poor people who cannot afford even 200, 350 rupees, which are currently being charged for the so called precaution dose, that they can afford it. So, who is going to take it? The third dose is not for free, as far as I know.
Okay, that's another interesting sort of economic dimension to it. Dr. Gilada, is that what's happening here? One of the contradictions we've seen in the Indian response is that people, very poor people, sold land, gold, took loans to pay for very expensive private hospital treatment at the height of the pandemic. But when it comes to vaccines, they're not willing to spend that money. Now, should the private sector, and I know it creates hierarchies that Wasim has called out, but I still think it's better than the vaccines going waste. If big companies are willing to foot the bill, for example, for their employees, should we say, please take them and administer the boosters?
You see, vaccine management is a dynamic process, and that should have been done in advance. But if it was not done, currently it can be done. So you make a osmosis between moving vaccine which are expiry, near expiry, to the government setup, from government setup which are larger expiry, either to the private setup or to export, or either to give free or at low cost. Secondly, as Dr. Bal was saying, that they reduce the cost of the budget for vaccination, 39,000 to 5,000 crore. But if you look at the cost of vaccine, Corbevax is only 50 rupees per vaccine, whereas they bought Covaxin for 250 rupees. So the cost of vaccine has gone down. And I don't know whether this is totally related to cost, but majority of the vaccination is over. And now when we open up, it will be going to endemicity. Endemicity is not end of COVID at all. So people will be requiring an annual dose. You will not call booster dose. COVID is like a flu, and flu shot is to be taken every year. So similarly, a COVID shot will be taken every year. Now there will be two group of people always. 60%, 70% going to free. Other 30, 40% will be able to buy. And if vaccine is available in market for 100 rupees, maybe doctor will charge 200 rupees, but it will be affordable. It will not be unaffordable.
So what
So
should happen?
why should the government think?
What should happen to these millions of doses that are sitting at the Serum Institute waiting for somebody to buy them,
No,
purchase them?
that's what I told you, Barkha. There should be vaccine management. There should be transparency. The government should tell that we'll require so much of vaccine in this month, that month, that month. If we are not requiring, you are at liberty to sell. They didn't allow them to sell. They didn't allow them to give it to COVAX. So I think the COVAX program, totally depending on India, is at collapse. So I think we allowed it to collapse, and we just provide them Padma Bhushan, Padma Shri, but we do not give them liberalize them that you can sell the vaccine provided it is not required in India. And that transparency is not given, and there is so much of bureaucracy. I probably even Serum Institute may not know who in the government will be authorized to say that, and that is the kind of situation in our country.
But here's my question. What does market approval mean if the policy is not liberalized, Dr. Gilada? What does market approval mean?
It is just the license of CDSCO. The moment the health ministry says that vaccine can be sold in shop, it can be sold in shop. So I think they are two different things. They are part of the same ministry, but they do not go hand in hand or in tandem. Secondly, the ICMR Director General is on extension for 6 months. He will be retiring on 31st of March. There is no transparency who will be Director General of ICMR. So all of them will be busy in lobbying who should become, who is required. And I think public health is at the least requirement. No, it is at most expense.
I like this phrase that you said that we give them Padma awards. Both the manufacturers of Covaxin and Covishield did receive Padma awards, but we do not liberalize
But tomorrow you ask Barkha, even Serum Institute or Covaxin, if your millions of doses are expiring and they can exchange that with Padma award, they will exchange it. They'll say, let vaccine not expire, we give back the Padma award to government. Because it is such a criminal waste.
Of course, but the point is that they would also argue, in fairness to them, that we manufactured these. We took a risk. We're not saying we're NGOs. We are for-profit companies. We took a risk. We made these vaccines. The government, if it had a booster shots, would buy these vaccines, right? I mean, or private sector would buy them. I'm still not understanding what does market approval mean. What does it mean in this context? But let's just get Vineeta. You're not agree? Sorry, Vineeta, you're not agree. Yeah, what do you want to say,
Yeah.
Vineeta?
I think that is where the Epidemic Diseases Act and other issues are coming into picture. That when you're, this is emergency authorization. Emergency authorization means that there is no permission for over the counter or whichever buying a vaccine with from the chemists. Which every other vaccine which has been manufactured in the past is can be bought like that. But if there is an emergency approval, you cannot buy it until the vaccine is properly and finally received its formal approval, whatever you call it, non-emergency formal approval. That is the point. That is why we cannot buy vaccine even if I pay 100,000 rupees for to the chemist.
Okay. Wasim, let's bring you back on what you call the medical neo-fascism. What should happen? You're not going to be able to convince private companies to be able to donate their vaccines if that's the expectation. One. Two, even the Gavi program now, I think, is probably saturated. I don't know, Dr. Pai can tell us more. Why is there such a lopsided distribution of vaccines when the Americans have flooded the program with vaccines? What's actually happening, Dr. Wasim?
I think there are two elements to it here, Barkha, and I think I will put up my hand and take some of the blame from the medical fraternity as well. I think one of the elements of the whole pandemic, the way the medical community responded, was initially everyone was scared. So as you would do in a pandemic, lockdowns, taking people's freedoms away, and all kinds of things. And then we had the vaccination, and then we saw all these patients dying in hospitals across the globe, including India. And that has really changed the perception of common people on the ground, as the trust in the medical profession has gone down. And this has been shown, although the trust is much higher than that for the politicians, it has gone down. And this is something that needs to be really addressed. Now, coming to your point about vaccination, so why is there vaccine hesitancy? Why is there what I would call more of a vaccine fatigue when it comes to booster doses?
Mm-hmm.
Like in the younger population in the UK, where the vaccine is offered free, the uptake has been very low. And if you actually, we have done some studies to really understand why people don't want vaccination. One of it has to go to a kind of a what we call a vaccine fatigue, with the people are getting into the pandemic fatigue. Most people
Mm-hmm.
have had COVID, have survived, and they think that they can then the pandemic is over. And secondly, this perception that Omicron is a mild disease. There is a data from the WHO that was published a couple of weeks ago that showed nearly half a million people died from Omicron in the UK, even after booster doses for nearly 80-90% of the population. Every week, 1,000 people are dying from COVID. So, still, the pandemic is there, and it's going to be there with us. And we really need a global response. And this is where, I agree with Madhukar. I'm really disappointed by the way the Western countries have behaved. Although there has been a criticism of the India, what they call the Maitri program, I was a big advocate of that.
Yeah.
You think about the globe. The nationalists in India were not happy about it.
No, I don't think it was about
So,
nationalism. We
yeah,
were
you
we were
have to give it to the
besieged.
world.
But see, with respect, we were besieged by a second wave that we were not prepared for, and Indians would not have found it acceptable for those
Yeah.
vaccines at that time going out of the country. Dr. Pai, you wanted to come in? Madhu, you wanted to come
No,
in?
I think there is one thing that we need to talk about. If the most vaccines, as Dr. Bal explained, were emergency use authorized, and most manufacturers deliberately limited its validity period. So the term expiration is not set in stone. Many
Mm-hmm.
manufacturers have gone back, done testing of their batches, and have extended the validity period on the batches that they've already manufactured. So it may be possible for India to
Mhm.
find a way to add 3 months or 6 months, so that that gives us a little bit more breathing time to use all the vaccines available, right? That's one thing. So let's use that option, test it, and make sure if it's valid, continue it. Secondly, COVAX is now starting to get more vaccines than they can actually absorb, because
That's what I was going
many
to ask.
countries,
That how did that happen? If there
it
is such a
happened
lack of
because many
equity,
countries were given low supply to begin with, and secondly, they were given interrupted supplies. African countries were getting suddenly billions of doses and then nothing for many months, and then suddenly a million doses. And you need time to build vaccine confidence in your population, right? If you and I were running a vaccination program, and if we kept on having interrupted supplies, or if we were given vaccines with 1 month left on it, how will we potentially move them into people's arms? India has taken a year to build the vaccine confidence. Canada has had a year. US has had a year. We have to give that same time to low income countries with a steady supply of vaccines to build the confidence. And the anti vaccine issue is a problem everywhere in the world now. Some of it has been exported by countries like US, right? Countries like US have actively funded anti-vaccine campaigns in parts of Africa. Funded. This is not a
wow.
trivial movement. You got to handle it and take it on. So if there is excess vaccines, let's add more time to the clock. Secondly, why are we not talking about children, Barka? There are so many millions of children in India, adolescents and children. Why can we not start offering it 5 and above? Why are we ignoring children? They've
Especially,
already
I
had the
mean,
worst time.
especially, yeah, I was just going to say, especially since we've had schools shut for 2 years
Yes,
physically.
yes,
Yes,
yes. We have
yes.
to start thinking about children in addition to opening to boosters for all adults. Children 5 and above must be a priority for India. And I'm worried that this declaration that Omicron has somehow ended the pandemic will mitigate against the rational way of going lower and lower in the age category.
Okay, Shahid Jameel, last word to you. Where would you want to see the policy shift in India?
As this, as they say, keep it simple, stupid. I would keep it simple, not complicate things further.
By doing what?
By just having a simple policy, give booster shots to everyone who is willing to come forward and take it. Uh, on the last point that Madhukar was talking about, vaccines to children, uh, one could argue that they have not really fully been tested on children. But also, I don't know of any vaccine that works for adults and doesn't work for children. Uh, I think this is where policy making bodies and people who sit on these bodies need to you know put their foot on the pedal. They have to be one step ahead. Uh, and if you allow me half a minute, I'll tell you of something that happened in UP to a very close family friend. Uh, his parents died of COVID. Mother died after one vaccine shot. A few weeks back, there was a message saying that the mother is due for a second dose. They called to say that she passed away, but 2 days later, they get another message saying that the mother has been given the second shot. And this is not in isolation. I believe there are media reports that this is happening big time in UP, which, as you know, is going through elections. Point is, all of this reduces confidence in the wonderful job that India has done vaccinating its population. So there are many dimensions to it. Pandemics are controlled by trust largely. This is the first pandemic which will be controlled by a vaccine, but it is largely trust and belief in the system. When that is missing because of confusing language or events like this, which are reported yet not dealt with, that brings down trust and confidence.
All right, we'll have to close on that somber note. We're often asked here why we continue to focus on COVID. I'm told more times than I can remember, nobody cares about COVID anymore. The point is that unfortunately, human psychology is made to respond only to a crisis. And then when the crisis comes, it's too late. We have seen that in the lull between the first and the second wave in India. The third wave left us relatively unscathed. But as every expert has warned, more the cases, the more the chances of a new variant, and you don't want to be in this deja vu place again. There is a unanimity on our panel that everybody needs a third shot, and hell, we may even need a shot every year. So it's very, very difficult to understand the policy of not giving every adult who is willing a third shot. In fact, one thing we didn't speak about is that there's probably going to be a black market for the third shot. There are people unofficially getting the third shot who think that they'll be safer. So all of that is also happening, leading to a greater absence of regulation. Thanking our experts, Wasim, Shahid, Vineeta, Madhu, and Ishwar. Thank you so much to all our doctors today, and thanks to our audience. See you tomorrow, same time. Goodbye. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.